Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. We're going to continue hearing evidence from Mr. Crawford in just a moment, I think. So could we have Mr. Crawford in, please? Good morning, Mr. Crawford.
Morning.
I hope you're ready to carry on.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Crawford, good morning.
Morning.
I want to turn next to Exover and your dealings with them. You worked with Exover on the Calc project, didn't you?
That's correct.
Was it you who recommended Exover that they work on the Grenfell Tower project?
No.
Do you know who did?
No.
Do you know anything about how Exover came to be involved on the Calc project at all?
I believe those I believe there's an indication early on that there's a certain convenience in transferring the same consultant team across. I think we heard that from the earlier hearing.
Yeah, but on the Calc project, I meant. Who got Exover involved?
Oh, sorry.
Originally on the Calc project.
Gosh. I don't recall.
Okay. What was your overall impression of the quality of Exover's work on the Calc project?
The project was complicated by the fact that there was a requirement for there's discussion of various strategies in terms of escape that involved sprinklers or not using sprinklers, and then there was complications in relation to the engineering strategy to accommodate that. So it wasn't straightforward. There was a number of revisions done to the strategy to get that resolved.
Can we please go to SEA 00004053, please? Now, this is an email dated the 24th of April 2012, and you are copied in on it if you see the list of copyees.
Yes.
And it's sent to Terry Ashton of Exover. And in the second paragraph, you can see the attachments and the subject matter. It's Calc and Grenfell Tower upgrade. So it's at a time when both are being considered. And in the second paragraph, you see that Bruce Soanes says to Terry Ashton, "We've thus far had no commitment in writing from you to a fire strategy on either the Calc Leisure Centre, Academy, residential development, or the Grenfell Tower upgrade. We've had no concrete input by way of drawing markups or draft reports to support the developing designs. This is becoming critical for us with 3 weeks to go before we submit the Stage D report for Calc, with much of the work undertaken so far by the whole team relying on the fire safety advice we've received at meetings. We fear that the designs have not had adequate scrutiny and that we are at considerable risk at this late stage of late changes, abortive work, and possible cost implications to the project." And then in the third paragraph, Mr. Soanes says, "If you are unable to reassure us that you are committed to the two projects by the end of this week, both agreeing contract terms and providing detailed advice, we will regard this as a renunciation of the Commission and be forced to look elsewhere for fire safety." My first question, Mr. Crawford, is when you were copied in on that email, did you read it?
That's 8 years ago. I mean, probably.
Do you remember reading it, do you think?
I don't. I mean, I have to say, Andre and Bruce were more involved with setting up the projects in terms of managing consultants and bringing them in. I would have been copied it. I probably would have read it. Yes.
Right. Now, it was Mr. Soanes's evidence that he was passing on a concern to Mr. Ashton from the Calc team. Was that your concern, that Exover had not provided adequate scrutiny of the drawings for Calc?
I can't recall.
Was it your concern that Exover had put in no concrete input on Calc at that stage?
I don't recall.
Did you have any discussions yourself with Mr. Ashton or anyone else at Exover at that time regarding resourcing issues?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you discuss the contents of this email with Mr. Soames at all?
I can't recall.
Okay. I mean, against the background of what is said in this email to be Studio E's, at least, dissatisfaction with Exover's work on the project in the way they set out there, do you know why you recommended them for the Grenfell Tower project?
I didn't personally recommend.
You didn't. Do you know why you were content with them to be the fire engineer on the Grenfell Tower project?
I'd have said the job they did ultimately in Calc was pretty good.
Did Exover do anything in response to this email to allay your or Mr. Soames' concerns as expressed there in that email?
I couldn't recall.
Could we please turn to LBI and 00000, so 5 zeros, please, 620, and go to the bottom email in the chain, which is at the bottom of page 2. Now, this is an email of the 10th of October, 2012, from Colin Childs of Leadbitter to Andre Cushel. Now, you weren't copied in on that email, but you were copied in on the email above it. But I'll just show you this one to start with. Andre, I have still, and this is from Colin Childs, I have still to receive a satisfactory response from the design team with reference to the concerns raised by the GAG, the Grenfell Action Group. Our client requires us to deal with this, and I'm not willing to commence the works until I receive demonstration that the fire safety of the estate has been considered with on the design. This is a clear requirement of the CDM regulations. The response received from Exovia is, in my opinion, casual. Should I issue this to GAG, it would further exacerbate an already high project risk. I must have a proper response regarding consultation with BC and LFB by return. Regards, Colin C. And then if you look above it, Mr. Cushel replies, and you were copied in at that point. If you go to the top, you can see, just running right from the very top of the page, Colin Childs sends the email string below it to you, and then below that, you can see that, or two below that, Andre Cushel responds to him, and then above that is your response to Andre Cushel and Colin Childs, just to set the context. And what Mr. Cushel says, if the operator can move down to that one, Colin, that's right. We look at that. The safety of the estate has been considered. Then if you look 6 lines down, you can see that Andre Cushel says, as you know, the separate Grenfell Tower Commission is running behind Calc, with designs currently sitting at stage C and BC LFB consultations still to occur. As far as we are aware, with the proviso on the Grenfell landscape, the proposed academy and leisure developments are not impacting on the fire safety of the estate. I've asked Neil to get back to you on the details of the BC/LFB consultations held to date. And you then write to Andre Cushel and Colin Childs on the same day, 10th of October. And you say, Colin, our contacts at RBKC have been John Allen and Dave Gammon, and you explain that. And then you say in the next paragraph, following an initial meeting with Building Control on the 28th of October 2011, I did ask the question in relation to fire access to and around the tower, see attached. However, this was not formally responded to, although we were led to believe all access is from Grenfell Road. And then Colin Childs' response to that above that on the page, as you can see there. Thanks, Neil. I'm afraid we need a formal response from RBKC. Please chase this. Now, I've shown you the whole email string. Do you remember reading Mr. Childs' email and when you received Mr. Cushel's reply?
From 8 years ago, no.
No. Do you accept that Mr. Childs' concerns about Exover's performance, which are set out at the bottom of page 2, which I read you, should have put you on notice as to Exover's perhaps somewhat less than thorough approach at that stage?
Well, certainly they might not have been as mobilised to the extent that they might have been at that point.
Right. Going forward in time, just under 2 years to the summer of 2014 when you took on the Grenfell Tower project.
Yeah.
Do you remember whether during your handover discussion with Mr. Soanes, you had a conversation with him about the involvement of Exover in the Grenfell Tower project?
Possibly. I was aware of the fire report.
Do you, was it your understanding at that stage that Exover had been instructed to assess fire safety issues as they pertained specifically to the overcladding of Grenfell Tower?
I understood that they produced the high-level fire strategy report.
Is that something that Mr. Soanes told you?
It's pretty much mandatory in any project of that nature and complexity.
Was it your understanding that Exover would be, well, let me try a different question. When you came into the project, say we're looking at July, August 2014, did you ask Mr. Soanes to see the reports, the fire strategy reports that Exover had produced so far on Grenfell Tower?
I'm not sure if I asked him, but I would have read them at some point.
Right. Do you remember when you read them?
Specifically, no.
Was it your understanding that Exover would in future be producing advice on the application of Regulation B4 of the Building Regulations 2010, external fire spread? Was that your understanding at the time?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure as in you can't remember, or you can remember not being sure?
Well, my understanding is they would have had the fire strategy report, and I would have read that fairly early on.
Right.
Because it's always a priority to understand. I mean, specifically B1 and B5 issues. I mean, they're very primary to any scheme, particularly where there's any complexity. So you would look at those and understand those and get your head around them as part of coming into the project, if you like. So you'd understand this. In terms of specifics to the facade, where it was relevant, you'd also expect commentary on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And again, I'm just focusing on the moment you came into the Grenfell Tower project, July, August 2014. Did you think or expect that Exover's work would cover the entirety of the Grenfell Tower project, or just a part of it?
I would expect it to cover where it was relevant.
Where it was relevant?
Yeah.
So all of it where it was relevant?
Yes.
I see. Thank you. Now, when you came into the project, summer of 2014, did you know that Exover had, at that point so far, produced 5 fire safety strategy reports? And I'll just list them for you. There's a report on the existing fire strategy for Grenfell Tower of August 2012, and then a design note in September 2012, and then issue 1 of the outline fire safety strategy for the refurbishment, 31st of October 2012, issue 2 of the outline fire safety strategy for the refurbishment of 24th of October 2013, and then issue 3 of the same strategy dated 7th of November 2013. And I should also just be clear, the initial design note was also for the refurbishment. Now, there are 5 of those. Do you remember that at that stage, when you came in, there were 5 such reports which Exover had done?
What I'd do when I come into any project is look at the most recent fire report to understand the status of the project relative to the fire strategy at that time. We'd have gone back and read the historical ones, not necessarily.
I see. Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. If you can go, please, to paragraph 71 of your witness statement, which is SEA 00014275 at page 28. Paragraph 71. and you say, you discuss an email exchange in September 2014 between Harley Ryden and Studio E in relation to a request for information, an RFI, regarding horizontal fire breaks in relation to cavity barriers, and we'll come back to that later in your evidence. Can I ask for you to be shown page 29 within the same paragraph where you say, third line down, in short, I contacted Exova, which was the fire engineer on the project, and produced the fire strategy reports. You see that?
Yes.
I would have contacted Exova as it is an authority on all things fire related.
Yes.
Now, my question is, was it your understanding at that time that prior to novation, prior to your Studio E's novation, Exova was the, quotes, authority on all things fire related, your words, in respect of the refurbishment at Grenfell?
Yes.
Yes. Did you have any reason to believe at that time that Exova's role had changed post-novation?
No.
So when you refer here to the fire strategy reports, can you just be clear what you're referring to?
All the reports that they'd created.
All the reports, thank you. And I think you say you had read those as part of the, is this right, as part of your coming into the project?
It's part of coming into any project. Personally, that's what I always do. I go straight to the fire strategy to understand the fire strategy of the project at the current time.
Right.
I would have seen, normally the way we file things, we'd have had a consultant folder, and it would have been labelled Harley, Exova, whoever it was, and you navigate to there and look at the dates and read them. Whether you'd go back and read them all from the start, as in Revision 1, Revision 2, Revision 3, possibly not. You'd certainly look for the latest. I may also have read it as part of the Stage E Employers Requirements tender set that Bruce had as a physical set on his desk.
Yes. Yes, I see. Now, let me take you then to the latest that you say you would have read. And in fact, I think you said on Thursday afternoon last week that you had in fact read it. That's just for our own record. That's day 9, page 136 at lines 13 to 20. If I can ask you to look at it, it's EXO 401106. And you can see there, it's dated the 7th of November 2013. It's issue number 03, and it's a report to Studio E. You see that?
Yes.
When you first read that as part of your handover with from Mr. Soanes, do you remember discussing its contents with Mr. Soanes?
Remember? No.
Do you remember discussing anything with Mr. Soanes about Exova's input at that stage?
I can't recall, but it doesn't mean that I didn't.
Can I ask you please to go to page 4 under the introduction? But it says there, you see, it says the refurbishment comprises, and just look with me if you would at it. Mm-hmm. There are 5 bullet points. Bullet point 1 is ground story level. Bullet point 2 is mezzanine level. And then bullet 3, walkway level. Bullet 4, walkway level, walkway plus 1 level. And the creation of 4 new residential apartments. And bullet 5, generally improvements to the building services. And then it says, this report details the applicable statutory controls in respect of fire safety and contains an outlined fire safety strategy for compliance with these statutory controls. The report is based on discussions held with the design team, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, and on fire access and fire strategy drawings produced by Studio E LLP. You see that?
Yes.
We can see, can't we, that the introduction section doesn't make any reference at all to the overcladding of the exterior of the building, does it?
No, but the last section does.
The last section does?
That's the whole report.
Ah, okay. but when you're looking at the summary of what the refurbishment comprises, and we can read it together, we can see that it doesn't make any reference to the overcladding. My question is, did you note the scope of the summary of Exover's report when you read it?
I believe it was within their terms of appointment that they were to look at the cladding or the external facade.
Indeed. Did you look at the terms of appointment when you read this report? Did you put the two side by side?
I don't recall putting the two side by side, but Bruce may have mentioned terms of appointment.
Bruce Soanes mentioned to you the...
He may have mentioned.
Right. Let me just be clear. When you had a conversation with Mr. Soanes at the handover, do you remember having a conversation with Mr. Soanes about
as I
terms of
mentioned
appointment?
earlier, I don't specifically remember anything specifically in relation to the Exover report. That's not because it didn't happen, it's because it's 8 years ago and I don't have that level of recollection.
Okay, I understand. Let me see if I can get at it this way. When you, as you say you did, read this report and you looked at introduction, do you remember what your thoughts were about the scope of the work Exover had been asked to do?
I don't know, to me it just reads like a fairly standard sort of generic introduction description of the project.
Right. You knew, I'm suggesting this because I think it's common ground between us, Mr. Crawford, that when you came into the project, one of the significant elements of the project was the overcladding of Grenfell Tower, yes?
It was one of the elements.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when you read this report and saw the introduction and the description by Exover of what the refurbishment comprises, did it strike you as complete? Or did it strike you as incomplete?
I don't recall. I mean, I just read the report. I read the report from start to finish, and I wouldn't analyse it in that way. I wouldn't be marking it or saying, I'd just be, because this is the third revision, this is where it was, I'd just read it, assume it, look at fire strategy drawings, look at the project. I don't think I'd look at it in the terms you're sort of indicating.
So can we take it that you didn't think to yourself when you read this report, oh, they've missed out the overcladding in their description of the refurbishment?
But they didn't, because it was later on.
Well,
But in the introduction, it's not there, but the many things that potentially not in an
so is the answer to my question,
introduction.
is the answer to my question no?
So what was the question?
Yes, of course. Can we take it that you didn't think to yourself when we read this report, they've missed out the overcladding in their description of the refurbishment?
Well, I guess not, because I read it at the end.
Right. Did you, maybe you don't remember, but did you have a discussion with Mr. Soanes about the precise scope of what Exover were asked to do?
I don't recall.
And what about a conversation with Mr. Ashton? Did you have a discussion with him about the precise scope of what Exover were asked to do?
I don't recall.
Do you remember discussing with either of those two gentlemen where Exover had got to in Exover's assessment of the issues pertaining to external fire spread at the time of your handover?
I would have understood it as per the line at the end of the report.
We'll come back to the end of the report in a moment, because I know you keep referring to it, and we will look at it.
I suppose what I'm trying to say is that at this point, when I took over the project, I'd have had an introduction. Mm-hmm. I'd have been concerned with certain things. The things I'd been concerned with were essentially M1 and M5 issues, because, for example, I knew some changes were happening in the lower levels. The lower levels, from a fire strategy perspective, were much more complex, in my view, and I would have been aware of those and focusing on those. Then I'd have read the whole report. in the context that it was the third version of the report, and that's where it was in the point in time. I wouldn't be going back and analysing it from the perspective of completeness of brief as you would at the start of a project.
Right. You mentioned M1 and M5. What are they?
Sorry, B1 and B5.
B1 and B5. I see. Now, do you remember ever discussing with Mr. Soanes or indeed Mr. Ashton where it had got to in its assessment of issues pertaining to external fire spread?
I'm sorry to say this, but again, my understanding was what it said in the document, which was at the end of the document, the statement at the end of the document.
All right. Well, we will look at that. If you could turn the page to the next page, please. Paragraph 2.1d. It's on the screen now. Section 2 is headed Statutory Considerations, and 2.1, the Building Regulations 2010. And then you can see that the 5 requirements of Schedule 1 are set out. There's B1 at the top and B5 at the bottom. And between them, we've got B2, internal fire spread linings, B3, internal fire spread structure, and B4, external fire spread. Now, it's clear, or was it clear to you from reading that, that the report was going to deal with each of those regulations, or each of those requirements within Schedule 1, so far as the refurbishment of the tower was concerned?
Yeah, my understanding would be that the report would deal with them in the terms in which they were applicable.
Yeah. Can we look at page 9, please? And this should be paragraph 3.1.4. Compliance with B4, external fire spread. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says, it is considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, but this will be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of this report. When you read this report, did you notice that paragraph?
I would have noticed it. I mean, if I read the report, I would have noticed it.
Yeah. And did you consider, or do you remember considering Exover's progress in relation to its advice on compliance with B4 external fire spread? Did you consider how it would progress, what it says there?
I'm not sure. I may have discussed with Bruce in the handover what his understanding was, or where he saw the level of compliance at that point.
Do you remember having a discussion with Mr. Soanes on when Studio E expected to receive the future issue of this report?
I don't recall having a specific contact.
Did Mr. Soanes tell you to progress the next issue of this outline fire safety strategy with Exover once the cladding subcontractor had been engaged and further detailed design had commenced?
I don't recall.
Did you ask Mr. Soanes what documents Exover had in order that they could complete the analysis they indicated would be provided?
I don't recall.
Did you yourself conduct any checks to see whether Exover had the documentation it needed to complete the analysis they said would be provided?
I don't recall.
Did you ask Mr. Ashton whether there was anything Exover needed so that they could complete the analysis that they'd indicated would be provided in a future issue of that report? Were you not in some way concerned that by August 2014, which was some 10 months or so after issue 3, that's 9 months after issue 3, of this report that an analysis of the compliance of the overcladding scheme with Regulation B4 of the building regulations had not, at that stage, been completed?
My understanding was that the cladding is detailed in the employer's requirements, and the stage E in the tender set was compliant, and the options were also compliant.
Where was that understanding from?
I guess that would have been from conversations with Bruce, and also I would have expected any scheme at tender stage to be compliant relative to that stage.
So let's just try and be clear here. Are you saying that Mr. Soanes told you that the cladding as detailed in the employer's requirements and the Stage E tender was compliant with the building regulations?
My understanding was that his understanding was that it was compliant.
If that was so, Mr. Crawford, do you know why, or do you remember asking yourself why it was that, as at November 2013, Exova was saying that they would confirm by an analysis in a future issue of this report whether the proposed changes would have any adverse effect on the building so far as external fire spread is concerned?
It's possible, because there was a number of options and final decisions hadn't been made, particularly in relation to planning. What decisions came out of planning, that they wouldn't have done that final issue till, let's say, maybe they had more detail. I don't know, possibly.
Are you telling us that Mr. Soanes had told you that even though Exova had said in their 7th of November 2013 report that whether the proposed changes would have an adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread would need to be confirmed by an analysis in a future issue of the report, nonetheless, there was no reason any longer to pursue such an analysis with Exova?
I don't recall.
If Mr. Soanes had told you that you needn't worry anymore about compliance with B4 as indicated in this report, because he had already had the confirmation needed, you would remember that, wouldn't you?
Possibly.
But you don't.
No.
On the assumption, and bear with me on this, that Exova had not, as at the summer, July, August 2014, given any confirmation by an analysis, whether in a report or otherwise, that the proposed changes would have no adverse effect on the building so far as external fire spread was concerned. On that assumption, it's right, isn't it, that Exova still had significant work to do, as at that date, in respect of assessing the compliance of the overcladding scheme with the building regulations?
Not necessarily. I mean, my understanding was that they'd been kept abreast of the development of the project and the scheme, and therefore they knew exactly what was going on with the scheme and what the proposals were. So the fact that they might leave that statement in the report, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what was proposed was, in their view, not compliant or compliant.
You say that that was your understanding.
Yes.
Was that an understanding which you had from being told that by somebody, or was it an assumption that you made?
I think that's the understanding I had from Bruce. I mean, I think Bruce was pretty clear that that Exova knew what was going on and what was being proposed, and that's that's the understanding I had.
I'm so sorry. I want to finish your answer. I don't mean to interrupt you.
That's it.
Okay. Are you, and let's just be very clear about this, Mr. Crawford, are you saying that Mr. Soanes told you that Exova knew what was going on and let's just be clear about this, and were satisfied that the proposed changes to Grenfell Tower were compliant with the building regulations, specifically B4 external fire spread?
Can you phrase that again? Sorry.
Yes,
it's quite long.
I will. Are you saying that Mr. Soanes told you that Exova were satisfied that the proposed changes to Grenfell Tower would have no adverse effect on the building so far as external fire spread was concerned?
I think that was his belief. How he communicated that to me, I can't specifically recall, but I do believe that was his belief.
Did you ever see a document that confirmed what you understood to be his belief?
No.
Did you ever ask him to get a document like that from Exova?
I don't recall.
Given its importance, can you explain why you didn't ask Mr. Soanes to get a document like that from Exova, or indeed seek one yourself?
Perhaps there's a feeling that, I'm not entirely sure, but I think, as I stated earlier, my impression was that Bruce understood what had been proposed up to then in his eyes and in Exova's eyes was compliant.
Do you agree that Exova's work at the tender stage, so late 2013, Mr. Crawford, had not been brought to a state of completion so as to form a satisfactory basis on which to proceed with further design and specification of products?
I couldn't comment on that because I'm not involved in that period of works. I think that's a question for Bruce.
A question for Bruce, all right. But would you agree that unless you knew whether or not for sure the cladding design was compliant with B4, then you couldn't really make any progress yourself?
Well, as I stated, my understanding was from Bruce that he believed that it was compliant.
Right. But you never really interrogated Mr. Soanes, perhaps that's a harsh word, you never scrutinised with Mr. Soanes what the basis of his belief was?
Well,
You just
not,
took it.
not in the way you are now, no.
No, but in any other way?
I don't recall. I mean, generally when you have these conversations, they're fairly informal, and you look at reports, you look at the drawings, and you satisfy yourself that of what the issues are and where the project is at.
Can I ask you to look at SEA?
All right, before we do that, can I just ask a question
Yes.
on the one that's on the screen at the moment? You can see, Mr. Crawford, in paragraph 314, that Exova write, it's considered that the proposed changes will have no adverse effect. Do you recall what you understood the proposed changes to refer to?
I would understand that is the general proposition to overclad, and with all the options that we'd provided to date.
Even though, as far as we can see, there is no reference in this report to overcladding at all.
Yes, because my belief was that Bruce had kept them abreast of where the project was. I mean, there have been regular design team meetings.
This is a fairly formal document, isn't it?
Yes.
If Exova had the overcladding in mind, would you not expect them to have made a reference to it somewhere?
Well, it does mention B4 is external fire spread, so that is external materials or cladding.
All right, thank you.
Can I ask you to go to SEA 000114773, please, Mr. Crawford? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are your handwritten notes of a design team meeting of the 13th, of August 2014
Yes.
at 10 a.m. And you can see who was present. SL, that's Simon Lawrence, isn't it?
Yes.
Of Rydens. And then there's something else below it, S, and it looks like PM Rydens Harleys.
That was probably Simon O'Connor.
Okay. And a little bit below that, after KL and something, and then stroke NC.
No, it's like BS stroke NC.
Okay. And BS would be Bruce Soames, I imagine.
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah. And then you see underneath that a line, and then it says cassette fix, and then underneath that, fire strategy not approved. Mm-hmm. Do you remember what that meant, fire strategy not approved?
Possibly with building control.
You say possibly building control.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is there were several iterations of the fire strategy plans that were commented on by building control, and that went backwards and forwards a few times. In fact, it went backwards and forwards right to the end of the project.
Right. Are you, so we're clear, are you saying that the Exova Issue 3, 7th November 2013, of the outline fire safety strategy had gone to building control and they'd not approved it?
I think in the context of what's written there, it meant the fire strategy drawings. As I mentioned earlier, there were comments being made on them that were going backwards and forwards. Yeah. I mean, the fire strategy drawings are pretty much inextricably linked with the document itself.
And we'll see perhaps later what did go to building control. But can we be clear that it's not the fire strategy set out in the Exova report, which we've just looked at, from November 13?
Reading that now, I don't think. Right. I don't think it is.
Could you, while we're on it, do you know who had not approved the fire strategy? Which individual?
Well, Paul Hansen was looking at means of escape with B1 and B5 issues, so he was commenting generally on the fire strategy drawings in that respect.
Okay. And whose responsibility did you think at the time it was to get the fire strategy approved?
Post-Novation, Ryden, although we were doing it on their behalf.
Right.
Or we were doing part of it in their behalf.
Right. Was there any discussion that you had with Ryden about how the fire strategy, as referred to there, would be approved?
Well, they'll feel aware of it because they were sitting in all the meetings. You notice Simon Lawrence at the top there. So, for example, Simon's very much aware of, let's say, the issues in relation to smoke vent and so on.
Were you told at this design meeting, or design team meeting, whether the work on the fire strategy had been completed by Exova, subject to approval?
No.
No. Were you told whether Exova was expected to produce an updated or final outline fire safety strategy?
Not that I recall.
Can I go back to your witness statement at SEA 0001427 at page 61? And this is paragraph 188. And you say there, this is under the heading Exova, you say in the second, well, I'll take it from the top. As above, Exova, the KCTMO's fire engineer, continued to provide advice on fire safety and fire engineering issues throughout the project. I did know that Exova was not appointed by Ryden as at 19th of September 2014. It was possible that Exova remained appointed by KCTMO due to the nature of some of the contemporaneous correspondence and Exova's lack of objection to assisting which I've summarised below. You see that?
Yes.
So is it right that you knew that Exova had not been appointed by Ryden?
Yes, that reference, that email, Simon Lawrence brought it to my attention that they hadn't appointed them yet.
Yes, and we may come to that if we need to shortly. And is it right that you didn't know for sure, as of September 2014, whether Exova had been retained by the TMO?
I knew that we'd recommended repeatedly that fire consultants used at the start of the project, and also believe Bruce recommended that they were used in the post-novation stage. I didn't know categorically whether they were employed by KCTMO, although the fact that they responded to all my queries to me suggested they're being employed by somebody. In some sense, it's none of my business who is paying them, so long as they were responding to my questions.
Was it not your job to find out who Exova had been retained by, so you knew who was responsible for them?
I'd have only queried that if they'd brought it to my attention. For example, if they weren't being paid or they weren't employed, you'd normally expect the consultant to say, well, actually I haven't been appointed for this phase of works, so I'll need to get back to you. And that would send an alarm bell, perhaps, that, well, actually, in the context of Simon Lawrence's email, if you pulled that up, you can see that he asked me to go back to him if they aren't responding, but they were responding. So I had no reason to believe that they weren't employed by KTCMO or another entity.
So does it come to this, that you knew they weren't appointed by Ryden, so you assumed they'd been appointed by
Someone
TMO?
else. Yeah.
I see. Did you think to explore with the TMO or Exova what the terms of their appointment were?
Frankly, that wouldn't have dawned on me. I mean, I'd have expected, the report's the report, the continuation of their work is the continuation of their work. If I was to make a query and they were to suddenly say, well, actually, we're not appointed to or comment on this aspect of work, then they'd have flagged something up to me.
So I think we can agree at least this, that you realised that Exova weren't subcontracted to Studio E.
I knew that, yeah.
You knew that. So although they were, as you put it, the authority on all things fire-related in respect of the Grenfell Tower project, that would depend on what they were asked to do, wouldn't it?
Yes.
And you had no control over that because you, Studio E, hadn't appointed them.
We hadn't appointed them, but we could ask any question of them that we wanted.
Well, you say that. It's right, isn't it, that if in fact you had a query about anything specific, they were only as accessible to you, Studio E, as their relationship with the TMO permitted?
Correct, except I never remember being told when querying anything that they couldn't respond to.
I see. So Exova essentially remained available to Studio E, really regardless of what questions you had for them in relation to the project.
And in the capacity that I would have expected.
And they would help. Is this right? You understood that they were really available to Studio E as a resource that you could use on an as and when basis?
Yes.
I see. Did you ever raise any concerns regarding the nature of Exova's appointment during the construction phase, either with Mr. Soanes or with Ryden?
I didn't see that as something for me to be concerned with. Unless I had an indication that something wasn't right, which is kind of inferred already.
Okay. We'll come back to that. Can I ask you to look at your statement, paragraph 197? This is on page 63. Thank you. And you say at the start of that paragraph, and I should just point out, this is under the heading Revision B Drawings. On 19th September 2014, Simon Lawrence Ryden emailed me and said, regarding Exova, I know that they provided information in the tender for KCTMO, but I don't know if they are still working for them. I know that we haven't employed them, so if you are getting some free advice, then great, otherwise we will need to look at this. And then you say, I replied on the 22nd of September, saying thanks for the heads up, and again flagged the importance of getting building control to agree the fire approach, to which Simon Lawrence said we would chat about after the design team meeting on 23rd of September 2014. Now, I'll show you all of that. I have just one or two questions about that there. Do you remember, did you impress upon Mr. Lawrence at that time, or at the design team meeting you referred to, 23rd of September, that Exova at that stage had not provided any analysis of the compliance of the proposed overcladding scheme with the building regulations, as they had promised to do or indicated they would do some 10 months earlier?
I don't recall doing that, but the line in the report does state that the current proposal will have no adverse effect.
Subject to compliance, subject to confirmation by way of an analysis and a future issue of the report, is what it says, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question again, did you impress upon Mr. Lawrence that Exova hadn't provided at that stage the promised analysis?
I don't recall, no.
Right. Did you impress upon him that significant further work needed to be done in respect of the fire safety issues as they pertained to the proposed overcladding?
I don't recall, no.
As you told the chairman that you understood that even though the scope of the work identified by Exova in the introduction did not include overcladding, your understanding of their work is that it would do, by reference to the paragraph we looked at and the reference to B4.
Yeah.
So my question is, did you not tell Ryden, look, we need to push Exova to produce the promised analysis on external fire spread?
No, but I sent them details later.
Did you ever tell anybody or seek to speak to anybody at the TMO of the heads up that you had received from, as you put it, from Simon Lawrence?
I'm not sure I had any contacts at the TMO. Direct contacts at the TMO.
No. And in general terms, is that true post novation that you had no contact with the TMO?
With the exception of Claire, I'm not aware of any.
Right. So can we take it that you didn't take any steps yourself to tell the TMO that Exova had not provided a detailed fire strategy in respect of the proposed overcladding?
No.
Given your understanding that Exova were, in your words, the authority on all things fire-related, did you not seek to get to the bottom of what Exova's role actually was?
In respect of?
Well, at least in respect of providing the analysis which would confirm their view that the proposed changes would not affect the risk of external fire spread.
Sorry, can you ask the question?
Yeah. Given your understanding that Exova was the authority in respect of all things fire-related, why didn't you seek to get to the bottom of what their role actually was, given that they'd not produced the promised analysis that they said they would do?
Well, I saw the consultation with Exova as ongoing. So, for example, as the details of the cladding became more apparent, I sent them to them. Yeah,
and did you not, at some point at least, think it appropriate to tell Ryden, or advise Ryden, in pretty strong terms, that a fire consultant, a specialist fire consultant, should be engaged, if not by Ryden, then by Studio E, in order to get to the bottom of the external fire spread questions, given that Exova hadn't produced any?
But I understood that Exova were engaged by someone else.
You understood that they were engaged by someone else, and therefore it was someone else's problem. Is that it?
No. It's only a problem to me so far if they didn't answer, for example, any queries that we had. If they were to, for example, turn around and say, "Oh, we can't respond to your question or your queries because we're not appointed to do this work," then I would have said, "Well, okay, there's something wrong."
I mean, at this point, really, you're getting, as Simon Lawrence has told you, free advice, weren't you, from Exova?
No, he says, "I know that we haven't employed them," meaning Ryden.
Yeah. And so if you, Studio E, are getting some free advice, then great. Otherwise, we'll need to look at this. So let me put a question to you. Did you think at that stage, September 2014, that Studio E, when it asked Exova for advice on an as and when basis, would get it for free?
No, if you look at what he said, he actually says, "I don't know if they're still working for KCTMO. My assumption was that they were still working for the KCTMO."
Yeah.
So it's not free advice.
Right. But it's advice that you weren't paying for, wasn't it?
But why would we? I mean, if you look at the diagrams at the start of my witness statement, section 10, there are a number of specialists and consultants that were contracted direct to, or were client side, and by that I mean KCTMO side, as opposed to Ryden side.
You see, the advice that you were getting, or could get from Exova, would come to you.
Yes.
But if you didn't actually know who they were employed by, would it follow that you wouldn't know the basis on which you were entitled to ask for that advice?
Well, let me phrase it another way. If I was seeking advice and there was never any, let's say, if I asked for advice and it was given, then I had every reason to believe that I was getting all the advice that I required. Therefore, why would I question the scope of the advice they were being asked to give? So it was satisfying everything that I was asking for.
How would you know whether TMO had... Let me try this one again. How would you know whether TMO themselves knew that a future analysis had been promised by Exova in November 2013 and not, as at September 14, yet delivered?
Well, all of that was pre my involvement in the project. So
Well, except that it wasn't, was it? Because in September 2014, the advice hadn't been delivered. My question again, how would you know whether TMO knew that?
Well, I'm not a mind reader, I wouldn't.
Would you not think to check with Ryden that TMO had known that fact so that TMO could give the right instructions to Exova?
In a certain sense, I didn't consider it any of my business who was employing who. I came into the project. I knew I had to get certain advice. I sought that advice. I got that advice.
Right.
I mean, that's my position.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to move to a different topic, and it's 11 o'clock. I wonder whether now may be a convenient moment for a
Yes.
break.
Would you like a break now, Mr. Crawford?
Yes, please.
Yes. Right. Well, we'll stop now for 10 minutes or so. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it while you're out of the room. We'll return at 11:10, please. All right? Thank you very much. We'd like to go with the usher. 11:10, please.
Sweaty hot rather than hot hot.
Would you ask Mr. Crawford to come back, please? Good. All right, Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Billett.
Mr. Crawford, I'm now going to ask you some questions about the envelope insulation, if I may.
Yeah.
That is the insulation applied within the new cavity that was formed by the rain screen cladding system. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think we can agree that there were two insulating products ultimately used as envelope insulation material on Grenfell Tower, RS5000 Celotex and Kingspan Cool Therm K15. Yes?
We weren't aware of the Kingspan product being used till after.
We'll come to that later on, but I think we can agree that they were used.
Yeah, ultimately, yes.
Yeah. Now, as we've already discussed between us, when you came into the refurbishment project, Celotex FR5000 had been specified in the NBS spec as the thermal insulation to be used in the cladding system. Yes. If you nod, it won't go on the transcript.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So can we just now then go back briefly to approved document B, which is CLG 0000224, and go to page 96, please. And I just want to remind you of paragraph 12.7 of approved document B. We looked at it last week. It says, under the heading insulation materials stroke products, in a building with a story 18 metres or more above ground level, any insulation product, filler material, not including gaskets, sealants and similar, etc., used in the external wall construction should be of limited combustibility, see Appendix A. This restriction does not apply to masonry cavity wall construction, which complies with diagram 34 in section 9. Now, it's right, isn't it, that Celotex FR5000 is a rigid polyurethane foam board, or PIR, product.
Yes.
Yes. And PIR products are not generally regarded as materials of limited combustibility.
They can be.
If you go to the BCA, you say can be. They can be regarded as materials of limited combustibility. Is that your experience?
I believe they can be, yes.
Right. Let me be clear, because I may have misled you by my question. I said polyurethane. In fact, PIR is polyisocyanurate, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So your answer is still the same, isn't it? Or is it?
It is still the same.
Okay. You say they can be. What are the circumstances, in your experience, as at July, August 14, in which a polyisocyanurate product could be a material of limited combustibility?
Well, it's a plastic foam essentially, and it's impregnated with a fire retardant to potentially to make it compliant in that manner.
So are you saying that as at the summer of 2014 you had come across PIR foam products for use as insulation that had that were of limited combustibility? Was that your experience?
I don't recall precisely.
No.
I mean, I understand the definitions in Table A7, for example.
Well, let's just look at those so we're clear. It's page 132 of the same document on the screen, please. Were you... here is table A7, use and definitions of materials of limited combustibility. Now, take a moment, if you would please, Mr. Crawford, just to look at that, just to help you with it, because it's a document in a number of parts. The left-hand column is references in ADB, guidance to situations where such materials should be used, and there are 9 instances of that. And then the definitions on the right-hand side of the page.
So 8, for example, would apply in the definitions on the left.
Yes, and did you know at the time that in order to be a definition of as a material of limited combustibility, it either had to be classed in the European class under A or B,
National class, yeah.
or any of the national classes set out in A, B, or C, or
D.
D. And D compares with C because it's about density. Yes. So were you familiar at the time with Table A7?
I was aware of the table. I'm reluctant to use specific words like familiar. It kind of implies that you know everything specifically that's in it.
Right. Do you recall when Celotex RS 5000, as opposed to FR 5000, was specified for the Grenfell project in place of Celotex FR 5000?
Do I recall the period when it was specified? Yes, it was forwarded to me by, I think, Ray Harley, on the 17th, 18th September, thereabouts, I think, 2014.
And what makes you recall that so specifically?
Because we were having conversation. I think they'd raised their RFI 1.
Yes.
In relation to the cavity barrier strategy.
Yes.
And as with many things in architecture, they're all interlinked. So, for example, how you may go about cavity barrier strategy, you have to consider the whole build-up of the wall, let's say. And Ray forwarded that information, I think in the belief that, I can't remember whether I asked for it or not at the same time.
I see. All right. So we'll come back to look at that chain of email correspondence in detail very soon. So you say it was Harley who specified RS 5000 in place of FR 5000. Do you know the circumstances in which that substitution took place?
Meaning the reason for it?
Yes. Well, the reasons and the reasons surrounding it.
No.
No. Was it not your business to know that?
Well, I suppose as specialist subcontractor, we're proposing a product that on the face of it looked very similar to the specified product.
On the face of what?
Description.
I see. All right.
It's worth being, sorry, just to interject, it's worth bearing in mind products are changing all the time. They're changing their names, their brands, their labelling. So, for example, RS could have been the same as FR, for example.
Okay. Did you ever, or did you at that time have a discussion with Ray Bailey or anybody else at Harley about why FR 5000 was being replaced by RS 5000?
I don't recall, except that that's what they're proposing, and
so
the nature of design and build gives them that entitlement to some extent.
So do we take it from that answer, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, correct me if this is wrong, but you simply took on trust from Harley that if they thought RS 5000 was compliant, that was fine by you?
I guess, yeah.
Yes? Really? Okay. Well, let's just go back a question or two then to Table A7. Were you aware, or did you have any thoughts at the time about whether Celotex RS 5000 was a material of limited combustibility, having regard to the matters in Table A7, which you say you were familiar with?
Well, the information, for example, on the technical sheet that Harley forwarded on the RS 5000 product makes reference, for example, to BS 476, which cross-references with limited combustibility testing.
I note your answer. You say it cross-references with limited combustibility testing. Where do you see that on table A7?
For example, D.
Yes, and that's, to be clear, 476.11, yes?
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
state 11.
11. Do you know what testing to BS 476.11 involved?
I understand the basic principles of BS 476 testing, but I wouldn't presume to assume that I knew anything specifically technical as that. Therefore, I would refer it to fire specialist, which I did.
Did you know that there was a difference between testing to BS 476.11 on the one hand and BS 476.6 and 7 on the other?
I'd always refer to fire specialist interpretation, particularly of this kind of information, because technically the use of the words thermocouples is, in my opinion, in many ways is beyond that of an architect. Additionally, I'd point out that, I mean, there's over 100 BS references within Part ADB2 alone. The idea that you'd somehow have complete knowledge of all of them is absurd,
Yeah.
in my view.
There's only one BS 476 reference under the national class for materials of limited combustibility, though, isn't there?
Well, yes, but there's, well, unless you did BS EN 13501 under European class.
I was talking about national class.
Or national class, I'm seeing yes.
Yes.
One.
So one wouldn't have to worry about all the other BSs, only that one. When one was looking to see whether a material was or was not a material of limited combustibility. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'd agree that you need to have a sufficient knowledge of technical interpretation to be able to interpret the complexities that are implied in that.
Did you know or give consideration at the time to whether RS 5000 was the same product or a different product from FR 5000?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. It's right, isn't it? I think we can agree with each other that Celotek's RS 5000 was also a PIR product.
Polystyrocyanurate, yes.
Yes. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you happen to know what FR in FR 5000 stands for?
No.
Would it be surprising if I said flat roof?
It would be, yes.
Right. Now, did you know that RS 5000, like FR 5000, did not meet the requirements for limited combustibility as set out in approved document B, table A7 that we've got on the screen?
I didn't know that categorically, no.
You didn't know it categorically. Did you know it a bit?
No, as I think I've stated and in my witness statement, I referred to the fire specialist to check its compliance.
So just to be clear, would it follow from your answer that you didn't know that FR 5000 should not have been used as an insulation product on Grenfell Tower unless either it was tested under a large-scale test under BS 8414 to the BRE 135 criteria, or there was a desktop report, or a holistic fire-engineered approach had been taken?
My understanding of the FR product was that it had been proposed by Max Forum originally, and from the conversations I had with Bruce, his understanding of it was that it was compliant. And then when I received the information from Exova, I sought to confirm to myself that from Harley, I sought to confirm to myself that it was compliant by checking it with the what I consider to be the higher fire authority, which was Exova.
Right. Well, we'll come back to that in due course. If we could look at your witness statement, please, at page 62. That's SEA 000142275 at page 62. You look at paragraph 192. You refer to an email, and this is in the middle of an email string, and you say, in response to the comment, Daniel Anketell-Jones, design manager at Harley, stated, the insulation is class 0. Therefore, after reading the correspondence below, I believe the fire barrier in these locations will not be necessary. Can you confirm this is acceptable? And then you say this. Again, I forwarded the comment to Exova together with the data sheet for Celotex RS5000 dated August 2014 that Daniel had attached to his email. If we can look at that, it's SEA 0001174, as you've referred to it there, paragraph 192. And let's look at the second email in the chain. This is the email from Daniel Anketell-Jones to you, Mr. Crawford, on the 18th of September 2014 at 16:03 or 4:03, copied to various people, including Simon Lawrence at Ryden. Neil, thank you for your response. He says the insulation is class 0, etc., as you've quoted in your statement. Now, there's no reference in that email to the data sheet, is there?
Not that I can see, no.
No. Well, we'll come back to that precise issue shortly. Can we look at the data sheet itself, which you didn't refer to, but which your statement says you forwarded? It's CEL 0000411, please. Is this the document that you were referring to in your statement?
Yes.
Did you read it at the time of
Yes.
the email correspondence? Did you read it all?
I read enough to be convinced that I thought it was appropriate to use.
Right. Now, if you look at the first page, which is the page in front of us, and we'll come back to the email chain later, let's just look at the documents. It says, a third paragraph down, with Celotex RS5000, you are specifying an insulation board, and then in the second bullet point it says, is the first PIR insulation board to successfully test to BS 8414, meet the criteria set out in BR 135, and is therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. And then it says, has class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product in accordance with BS 476. Now, we know that Mr. Anketell-Jones had said in his email that it was class 0. My question is, what did class 0 mean to you at the time?
Understood class 0 in relation to diagram 40 and where it should be applied in relation to diagram 40. I think they've linked class 0 to BS 476. You can see that in the third dot down. And obviously, I mean, the way this information is presented, it's repeated use of its applicable for use for buildings over 18 metres. I mean, everything in this document to me suggests that the product is appropriate in rain-screen use. That's its opening line in buildings for more than 18 metres in height. I had no reason to suspect that it wasn't based on the information that I read, and I forwarded it to Exova for confirmation.
So to answer my question, you say that you understood class 0 in relation to diagram 40, and that it should be applied in relation to diagram 40.
But it also cross-references BS 476 there, which is also referenced in limited combustibility testing.
I see. It doesn't say which 476, though, does it?
Well, as I said, I don't consider myself a specialist in that level of testing.
Right.
I mean, if it says BS 476, then that's what I understood by it.
You refer to diagram 40. Did this thought go through your mind at the time? What had diagram 40 got to do with the use of insulation?
Well, it talks about class 0 surfaces.
Yeah,
We mentioned before the internal surfaces.
right. What would class 0 in the context of an insulation product to be used within a rain screen mean?
Well, it's a surface flame spread classification.
Yes, and how would that be relevant to an insulation product that you knew was being applied within the rain screen and not as part of,
Well,
not as the external
They
surface?
use deliberately, well, in my view, talk about class O through the whole product, which I think is misleading. I can't actually see that here, but it was in the version
It does say it.
Where does it say it?
Third bullet point down, has class 0 fire
Oh, yes,
performance
through the
throughout
entire product. Yeah, sorry, yeah.
What does that mean to you?
It suggests to me that it's retarded and reduced flame spread throughout the product.
Is that right?
I mean, to be blunt about it, we've obviously seen the recent emails in terms of the internal correspondence within Celotext, and clearly they sought to deceive, and they calculatedly sought to deceive based on the understanding that an average architect would have with the way they've worded this document.
Mr. Crawford, I'm going
And to me, that's
to cut across that answer.
That's apparent by that reference to BS 476 and the way it cross-references with limited combustibility. It's deliberately misleading. It's masquerading horse meat as a beef lasagna, and people bought it.
Well, Mr. Crawford, I'm interested in your recollections as they happened at the time, and not in what you now say about the behaviour of other people. Okay? So, what I want to know is what you thought on reading this document at the time. Do you understand?
Yeah.
What I want to know is when you read, as you say you did, this data sheet, what I want to know is what you took from the third bullet point down. Has class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product in accordance with BS 476? Do you understand my question? At the time, what did that mean to you?
All I can say is the totality of what was written there and made me understand that this product was compliant in that use. And for me to verify that, knowing the technicalities that are involved in limited combustibility testing, was to confirm that with Exova, which I did.
This data sheet is not, is it, presenting this product as a product of limited combustibility in accordance with
No,
Section 12?
it's presenting it as a product suitable for buildings, rain screen in buildings above 18 metres.
Certainly that is what it says at the very top.
No, it says it repeatedly. Through
And
the document.
all right, but can you identify, well, take it from me, because it's not in there, that nowhere in this document does it say that RS 5000 is a product of limited combustibility.
You're telling me that, so I'm taking your word on that.
And nowhere in this document does it say that it is a product of limited combustibility in accordance with section 12.7 and table A7 of the of approved document B.
If you're telling me that, yes.
Well, do you recall ever reading it in there?
Well, I've told you how I read it. I told you how I understood the document and how I checked the document.
So, just so I've got your evidence clear on this, it's the class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product, which to you meant that it was safe to use on buildings above 18 metres as an insulation product?
It's the entire presentation material. I then sought to check that interpretation with Exova, which I did, and which I understood from what were fairly emphatic confirmation from Exova that it was applicable, and that it could be used. Their understanding of how it was and how it could be used may have been different from mine. They may have had, they work in hundreds of buildings, they may have had knowledge of BR135 testing, for example, that led them to believe that it was applicable in this particular build-up.
But you don't know that, do you?
No, but what I know is from the conversations I had with Exova that they were fairly emphatic about the fact that it was appropriate to use, and that's what they suggested to me. I mean, that's my understanding from the conversations I had with them. I asked them to put it in writing. They put it in writing in the context with the cavity barriers. On reflection, it's a tacit approval in writing, but from the conversations I had with them, I understood that it was appropriate to use.
Right. Now, looking at the datasheet, page 1, just above the bullet points, it says, with Celotex RS5000, you are specifying an insulation board that, and then the second bullet point says, is the first PIR insulation board to successfully test to BS8414, meet the criteria set out in BR135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. Now, do you remember seeing that?
Yes.
Did it not occur to you at the time when you saw that the reason why this material was acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height was because it had, as it said, passed a BS 8414 test and met the BR 135 criteria?
Well, I think I've explained this several times now, that there's multiple ways in which the product can be compliant through various tests, the BS 476, the BS EN 13501, the BS 8414. I understand there's different routes to which you effectively prove that compliance. I don't think an architect has the technical ability to analyse all that, and it's a highly specialist and technical set of information. Also doesn't help when it's misrepresented. So my first port of call was to send it to what I considered a higher fire authority, i.e. the fire specialist, and ask them to evaluate it.
You say it's misrepresented. Can we just be clear? What do you say was misrepresented?
To me, the suggestion is that this product is appropriate for use in buildings over 18 metres, and everything about it suggests to me that it can be used potentially under BR 135 or as limited combustibility.
You say or as limited combustibility. Does that tell us that you knew there was a difference?
I think the class O performance throughout the entire product, when it's worded in those terms, it's ambiguous. And when it relates it to BS 476 in those terms, it's ambiguous.
Well, let's read on then. If you go to page 2 of this document, in the middle of the page it says physical properties. And underneath that it says fire propagation, this is the last but one, BS 476 pass 6, pass, surface spread of flame, BS 476 part 7, class 1. Do you remember looking at that detail when you saw this data sheet in September 2014?
I don't specifically.
Had you done, you would have noticed, no doubt, that it did not say that it had passed a test under BS 47611, which you told us earlier was the test for limited combustibility under Table A7.
Yeah, I think I go back to my original point, which is that I'd always forward this to a fire specialist, a higher authority, to get their understanding in the context of the whole build-up
Right.
facade.
And then if we go to page 3, at the very top, certification. Celotex RS5000 is a premium performance solution and is the first PIR board to successfully meet the performance criteria set out in BR 135 for rain screen cladding systems, and then it sets out what the test was. Did you read that at the time, do you think?
I don't recall.
Did you notice what the system tested was?
I don't recall.
Did you notice the wording at the bottom? The fire performance and classification report issued only relates to the components detailed above. Any changes to the components listed will need to be considered by the building designer. Did you read that at the
I
time?
don't recall reading that.
Did you understand from this document that the only basis for Celotexi's claim that RS 5000 was suitable for use on buildings over 18 metres in height was that it had, as Celotex said, satisfied the BRE 135 criteria by way of a full-scale BS 8414 test?
No, I don't think I understood. I don't think I understood the product as being as compliant only under necessarily compliant only under the BR 135 test. I understood that it could be compliant, and in order to check that compliance, I forwarded it to the fire consultant.
So do we take it from that that the actual basis of Celotex RS 5000 as suitable for use above 18 metres, as set out there, namely in accordance with the test identified, was not something that you thought needed to be considered by the building designer because you didn't check it yourself?
Like I said before, I think the interpretation specifically of parts of approved document B are extremely difficult, and I would forward them to a fire specialist, or at least seek fire specialist advice, which I did.
Just taking it in stages to see how far we get, do you accept that the configuration and the materials that were used in the BS 8414 test as set out in this data sheet, as we can see on page 3, was not the same as that proposed and in fact used at Grenfell Tower, was it?
No, it doesn't necessarily mean they wouldn't behave the same way, but no, they're not the same.
And therefore, it was a change to the components which would need to be considered by the building designer. Did that occur to you at the time? That because the system was different?
If you're assuming a B135 test in relation to that, and again, as what I pointed out, BI Exova have our authority in fire and have massive number of desktop studies and tests which they can call upon, and I suspect that's what they used to inform the fact that they believed it was compliant.
And when you read this document, did you think to yourself, it is compliant and I can use it above 18 metres in height? Or did you think to yourself, I'm not sure, I better ask Exova?
I wouldn't assume anything in Part B in many ways. I think from what I saw in the literature on the front of the product, I did pretty much assume that it was appropriate for use, but I sought to check that with the fire specialist.
And the basis of your, what you call pretty much assume, your assumption, just so that I'm clear, is what? The reference to class naught? Was that it?
It's as set out in my witness statement. It's all those statements combined.
I see. Can I ask you to be shown a document which you may not have seen, and if you haven't, we'll think again. Look at CL 6012, please. Now, this is something called a rain screen cladding compliance guide when specifying Celotex RS 5000 in buildings above 18 metres. And it's dated, although I don't think you can see it on the screen, it's dated August 2014. At the time of your coming into the project, or indeed at any time, did you see this document?
No.
Right. Now, in September 2014, on the 2nd of September, you, I think, attended a design team meeting number 2. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay, I'll show you a document. If you can go, please, to SEA 000111581. These are the minutes of the meeting. And you can see that it was held on site at 10 a.m. on that day, 2nd of September 2014. Mr. Lawrence was there, Mr. O'Connor was there from Ryden, and you were there as the project architect at Studio E. You see that?
Yes.
And Mr. Anketil Jones and Kevin Lamb were there from Harley as well. Now, can I ask you, please, to go to item 3.62 on page 4. It's under the heading against 3.60, cladding, brackets, insulation, fixings, panels, etc. And 3.62 discusses U values. You see that?
Yes.
And it says U values were discussed with SL, asking how the figures in the spec were arrived at and whether they needed to be rechecked from an M&E and insulation point of view. Is the insulation thickness shown on architect drawings correct? DAJ confirmed that he had checked them, but with the assumption that RML were fitting further insulation internally. SL didn't believe this was part of the spec. All parties agreed to check their documents. See that?
Yes.
And then there's a PMN, which I think is a post-meeting note, which says Max Fordham tender U-value document was shared to team via email. External wall construction was checked against all tender information and all information shared. Do you know, or do you remember, what figures in the spec exactly were checked?
No.
Do you know why Mr. Lawrence wanted to recheck the U values?
I don't recall.
Do you know what had changed, perhaps, that had made him do that?
I don't recall.
Did you review the Studio E tender information in respect of the insulation at the time?
I can recall whether this went back to Max Forum as a discussion or not. I just without seeing the associated correspondence.
Do you remember have any discussion with Mr. Soanes about how the U value was decided upon?
I knew it'd been derived from the original in the original Max Forum report.
It'd been derived from that. Did you have a discussion about it?
I knew there's a U-value target, and there'd been a proposal to achieve that U-value target. I don't recall any specific detail, if that's what you're asking.
Do you remember whether you checked the U values with Mr. McQuat or anybody else at Max Fordham?
I can't recall this particular incident, to be honest.
Did you look back through the records you had, like emails, to understand how the target U value had been decided?
I may have done. I just.
Do you remember any discussion historically in the project, before you came on the scene, of the use of mineral wool as an insulation product?
No.
So you can't help us as to why it was that mineral wool had been discounted for use as insulation?
I understood that the thicknesses were impractical to achieve that U value. So you'd be the bracketry would.
Who did you understand that from?
I think Bruce.
I see. Now, can I take you on a little to SEA 00009561. This is an email of the 1st of November 2013. I'll give it again. It's SEA 409561. And it's an email from Tom Ashton at Curtins to Artelia and to Bruce Soanes. And I don't think it came to you, but it says, "Dear all, please find our structural specifications attached." And I suspect one of the reasons it didn't come to you is that you weren't involved in the Grenfell project at that time. Now, I'm assuming, Mr. Crawford, unless you tell me otherwise, that you didn't see this email at the time.
No, this is a year and a half before.
Exactly, but let's look and see what the structural specifications were. It's one of the attachments to the email, and it's a TMO 1002249. And in the email, it's the one that's entitled LO1212 spec 001. It's the last attachment referred to. And there it is. It's Curtin's spec of the 1st of March 2013 for the design, supply and application of overcladding systems to Grenfell Tower. If you look at this, do you remember ever reading this document once you'd taken over from Bruce Soanes?
I don't recall seeing this document.
You don't recall ever seeing it, is that right?
I don't recall seeing it, no.
Okay. Did you know, and I'll ask the question in a general way, that this specification had at least recommended that the cladding system should comply fully with the recommendations of BRE, the BRE document, Fire Performance of External Thermal Insulation for Walls of Multi-Storey Buildings, dated 2003?
I don't recall seeing the document, so I wouldn't recall.
You wouldn't know.
seeing it.
Did you ever have a discussion with Mr. Soanes about whether the system, as specified in the MBS specification, was compliant with BRE 135?
Specifically with 135, no?
Yes.
No.
Would you agree with me, and this may be a hypothesis if you didn't read the document, so putting it in that context, Mr. Crawford, that if under this structural specification that Harley were working to, if they were required to work to it, if that's the case and the cladding system was to comply fully with the recommendations of BRE 135 of 2003, then the recommendations were part of the performance criteria for the system?
This, I can't answer that. It's a hypothetical question.
Okay, you won't answer. All right. Or can't answer. Just generally then, before I leave that, did you take any steps yourself to ensure at any time that Harley's drawings were compliant with the recommendations under BRE 135 2003, or indeed 2013, which was the 3rd edition?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. I'm now going to turn to a different topic. Mr. Chairman, we're a bit early for the next break, but the next topic is quite long, so I'm entirely in your hands. I'm very happy to start it.
When you say quite long, what are you talking
It's likely to take us up to the lunch break and possibly
about?
beyond.
Perhaps you'd rather have a break while you've got the chance, Mr. Crawford.
Yes.
I think that would be sensible.
Yeah.
All right, we'll rise for 10 minutes. So if you go to the usher, please, we'll come back at 12:05. Thank you. Right, 12:05, please. Yes, would you like to ask Mr. Crawford to come back, please? Okay. Right, Mr. Crawford?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Mr. Millett?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crawford, I'm going to ask you some questions now about the exchange of emails on the 17th and 18th of September 2014, following the request for information from Harley to Ryden. If we can start, please, with SEA 11730 and go to page 4. And there you have an email from Daniel Anketel Jones to Simon Lawrence and Simon O'Connor of Ryden, copied to you and Mr. Soanes, well, actually to both of you, and copied to Kevin Lamb. And the subject is Grenfell Tower cavity fire barriers. Simon, please find attached RFI 001, which relates to the requirement of fire breaks. This may be something that has already been decided or may need confirmation from the local fire officer, as the opinion tends to vary. You see that?
Yes.
And then the request itself is which is attached, is at HAR 00003616, please. And you can see it there, request for information form. The date on the right-hand side, 17th September 2014. It's from Daniel Anketel Jones at Harley to Simon Lawrence at Ryden's. Date answer required, 26th of September 2014. Query, please may you confirm the required extent of the horizontal fire breaks within the cladding areas. And then the suggested solution, we believe that they will be required at every floor level on the vertical columns, but not in the area of cladding between windows. This is because there is no chimney effect here, and therefore the cladding will not add to the spread of fire. Now, first, why, because we've seen that you received this document, my question is, why did you think at the time that Harley was sending you this request, as well as Ryden, given your post-novation role as you saw it?
Well, if you look at the original email, if you bring that back up on the screen.
Yes, it's SEA 000-11730, page 4.
Where they mention may need confirmation from the local fire officer as the opinion tends to vary, meaning building control. So I saw this as assisting in the coordinating building control.
Why did that occur to you as something for Studio E as opposed to Ryden alone?
Well, we obviously had a cavity barrier strategy at stage E within the employer's requirements, and what you're suggesting is contradictory to that.
Well, so the question then is, and I want your recollection of how you saw this at the time, Mr. Crawford, was the RFI, that was the question, a question which fell within the scope of what you saw as commenting on design intent?
Or other manifest issues, yes.
Or rather manifests issues. I'm not sure I'm understanding that qualification.
Okay, the way I saw this is we had a fire strategy, a cavity barrier strategy at stage E in employers' requirements. They were proposing a different strategy, so it was perfectly logical for them to quantify that against our strategy, particularly when it related to coordination of building control submission, for which is part of our responsibility, which is what's inferred by confirmation from local fire officer.
So just to be clear about this question am I right in saying it fell outside the scope of what you saw as commentary on design intent?
I know where you're coming from, and
Well, never mind about where I'm coming from. Did you or did you not see it as falling within the scope?
well, it's not architectural intent. Is it architectural intent? Borderline.
Borderline. And
But
given
the fact they've well, look, I think I've said it already. They came to us for specific information in an RFI in relation to the clarification against our original scheme. It'd be unreasonable not to answer it, or at least attempt to answer it.
well, Harley were already on board at this point, weren't they?
Yes.
As the specialist subcontracting designer for the cladding.
Yes.
So why didn't you go back as a recipient of this email to Daniel Anketell-Jones and say, this is a matter for you and to work out with Ryden and not a matter for us because it does not fall within the scope of architectural intent or design intent?
Yeah, but it's an issue of coordinating building control and ultimately seeking to get building control sign-off. So, and, well, yeah, that's what I'd say, I guess.
Okay, well, we see your response, or rather your next move, which is if you go up the page 4, we can see that under cover of an email on the 18th of September at 11:08, I'm so sorry, we've gone too far. That's it. You send the email that you've received on to Terry Ashton at Exova with the RFI, yes?
Yes.
And you copy in Simon Lawrence and Simon O'Connor, and you say, I'm working on the Grenfell Tower regeneration project from the Studio E end. The following RFI has come in relating to horizontal fire breaks within the cladding areas. Can you comment on the RFI attached and whether you believe this interpretation in relation to stack effect is correct? Now that's just the first point is that's not, is it, the coordination of answers with building control? You're essentially passing him on the question you've been asked by Daniel Anketell-Jones.
Yes, but ultimately his original question related to, I mean, he raised the point that different building controls have different, or he didn't use the word building control, I can't remember what he used, but that's what he was referring to. Building control, fire officers have different interpretations of the requirements of cavity barriers. Therefore, it was related to building control ultimately.
You then move up the page, if we can please, to page 3 of that email chain. I'm sorry to do this in reverse order, but that's how these things are. And Mr. Ashton replies at 11:33 that morning, 18th September 2014, and he says, Neil, I've never seen details of what you're doing to the external walls. Do you have any cross-sections or elevations? Now, let's just take this slowly. At this stage, Mr. Crawford, you had read issue 3 of Exova's outline fire safety strategy, as you've told us before.
Yes.
And you had read in that document in relation to B4 that there were no adverse effects, but that would be confirmed in a future analysis.
Yes.
Mr. Ashton's response that he had never seen details of what Studio E had designed.
No, that's not what he said. He says, I have not seen details. Doesn't mean he didn't know what was happening in the external walls.
You've cut across my question.
Sorry.
Let me try it again. Mr. Ashton responds, and he says that I've never seen details of what you're doing to the external walls. Did that come as something of a surprise to you at the time?
Well, my understanding from discussions with Bruce is that Exova were fully aware of how the scheme had developed, including the external wall build-ups.
Well, let's just go back a little bit to the evidence that you gave us this morning, Mr. Crawford, about that paragraph which deals with requirement B4 in the building regulations within the Exova fire safety strategy. And you told us that you'd thought that Mr. Soanes had believed that he'd been told by Exova that the strategy was compliant, that the design was compliant. Now, when Mr. Ashton tells you in September 2014 that he has never seen details of what you're doing to the external walls, did you not stop and think and ask yourself how it could be that Mr. Soanes had previously thought, if that is correct, that he had been told by Exova that the external wall construction was compliant?
No, because he says I've never seen details. Harley were doing the details. They were doing the 1 to 5 details. We hadn't done 1 to 5 details in, for example, the employer's requirement set. So they understood the concept. They understood it in a broad brush stroke, let's say, sense of what was being installed. But what he's saying is I've never seen details. I understand details mean specific details, as in the specialist subcontractors' details.
Yes. So did Mr. Ashton's response not undermine entirely what you had read in the outline fire safety strategy from 2013?
No, because that's an outline fire strategy. It's not a detail fire strategy.
Did it not undermine the belief that you had that Mr. Soanes had been told by Exova that the designs at that stage were compliant?
No.
No. Did it give you cause to consider that Exova had not, in fact, at that stage, considered at all the impact of the overcladding scheme and its compliance with requirement B4?
Sorry, can you rephrase that or repeat it? Sorry.
Yes. Did Mr. Ashton's response to your question not give you cause to consider that Exova had not, in fact, considered at all the impact of the overcladding scheme and its compliance with requirement B4 of the building regulations?
I don't think it necessarily did, no.
But if Mr. Ashton had not seen the details of what you were doing to the external walls, how could he possibly give any reliable advice about whether the overcladding scheme did or didn't comply with requirement B4 of the building regulations?
But just to explain that, he was taken through the scheme as the scheme developed. My understanding was the scheme was developed up to tender stage. He did understand the concept of what was going to the wall. What he's saying here is I've never seen details. The key word is details.
Did you take up Mr. Ashton's response with Mr. Soanes?
I don't recall, possibly.
Would you not have expected Studio E and yourself as project architect, and I know you don't like the term, but as lead consultant and as lead designer, to have sent the details that we see there, and referred to by Mr. Ashton, to Exova at an earlier stage, so that they could advise on whether the various elements of the cladding design and the system did comply with approved document B?
Well, I think I've already explained to you what my understanding was, and the information that was, for example, worked up to and in the Stage E report wouldn't have included and didn't include that level of detail. It didn't include 1 to 5 details, for example.
Did it not occur to you at the time to go back to Mr. Ashton and ask him a question such as, well, hold on a moment, I need to understand what details you have seen and what details you haven't seen in relation to the external walls?
Well, with all
Did that occur to you?
With all due respect, I don't know exactly what he had and hadn't seen or hadn't discussed with Bruce, but my understanding was that Exova, whether Terry individually or as a totality, had an understanding of where the project was at that point in time. Now, when he's made this comment, I then send him the details, which had quite recently just become available from Harley.
Well, all right. Let's look at that. If you go on to page 3, up the page, you can see your answer. Neil Crawford to Terry Ashton, 18th September at 12:18. Hi, Terry. Do you see that? Please see attached our sections and the initial drawing set we've had from Harley's. The initial drawings from Harley's are fairly limited, but they attempt to establish the basic approach. Regards, Neil. Now, let's just look at the drawings that you sent to Mr. Ashton. I think you attached the Harley initial drawing set, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you refer to it in your statement, but let's look at it. It's SEA 000117114, please. Now, we can scroll through these quickly, just to, well, not quickly, but gradually perhaps, just to identify what it is you sent. And I'll just let you do that. If Mr. Operator, you could please just scroll down through the drawing so that the witness can see what it is he sent. So that's page 3, window head upper levels. On page 4, we've got window jamb. That's upside down, but it probably doesn't matter. And then page 5, the vents. And page 6, we've got jamb joint upper levels and column front. Page 7 is jamb joint upper levels. Page 8 is column joint. Page 9 is window sill lower levels. Page 10 is window head lower levels. And page 11 is jamb joint lower levels. Just to remind you of what it is you sent. And those were window, I'm summarising them, window head, sill and jamb sections plus typical bay west elevation. Now, we can look at any one of these if you'd like to, but am I right in thinking that no materials are identified, either in terms of panel or insulation type?
Not within this set, no.
No. And there are no details of the proposed cavity barrier locations either, are there?
No.
And indeed, parts of the window assembly are unlabelled, aren't they?
That's correct.
Yeah. So if you go back to your email to Mr. Ashton, just have a look at it, SEA 0001173 at page 3, yours at 12:18. The second line, you describe these as fairly limited, but they attempted to establish the basic approach. And that's right, isn't it? That is all they were.
Yes.
And you then sent, just following the facts through, some Studio E section drawings. And the first one I want to show you is SEA 000111711 for the offline version, please. We want that for the offline version. And this is yeah, that's right. We may just have to blow it up a little bit. This is entitled Detailed Section Sheet 1. You can't see it on the screen. If you go to the bottom, you'll have to read it, I'm afraid, in portrait, although it's a landscape document. But if you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, if you turn your head, you can see it says in the third box from the left, Detailed Section Sheet 1. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's dated the 26th of September 2013. Yes?
Yes.
And on the left-hand side of the drawing, the first and the third labels down from the top. Yes, perfect. Under the big 01, next to the H92123, you can see that it says zinc composite rain screen panel and framing system to sills. You see that?
Yes.
Now, in fact, it's right that by this time, this is mid-September 2014, aluminium composite panels had been selected, hadn't they?
I believe that had been proposed, yes.
Yeah. Can you explain why you are sending Mr. Ashton drawings which show zinc composite cladding when, in fact, aluminium composite panels had by now been selected?
Well, that's not actually quite true. If you look down at the bottom of that, you can see it says aluminium composite TBC. So it's true the drawing shows both zinc and aluminium composite, although they're both national class 0.
I wasn't asking you about National Class 0, Mr. Crawford. I just want to understand why it is that at H92, where I've identified, it says zinc composite rain screen panel. Can you explain why it still said that, given that ACM had been selected?
I think Bruce was hoping that the zinc would perhaps stay, and certainly there were issues relating to discharge of the final planning. Our final planning decisions were still being made in the background.
Right. Okay. Well.
So in essence, what I'm saying is that drawing does show 2 different types of cladding. What I'm saying to you is, materially, my understanding is that there's effectively no difference in terms of performance.
Right. We know that there was some element of aluminium on the first 4 floors, Mr. Crawford, just to be clear about that. But at H92, at 123, which is that part of the NBS spec which refers to the rain screen higher up the building, it still says zinc. And I'd just like to try and understand why you were sending Mr. Ashton at this stage drawings which said zinc when it was ACM.
Yes, but it also says H92 125 halfway up, PPC aluminium composite.
Yes, Mr. Crawford, we've been around this before. That may be the lower levels, but higher up it wasn't going to be.
No, it's not the lower levels. It's still within the main body of the upper. When you say lower levels, do you mean levels, top 20 levels, or do you mean within the level within that level?
Yeah. H92 125, which is what you're focusing on, where it says aluminium. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that the NBS spec refers to grain screen cladding, first 4 floors elevation, and internal envelope of main entrance canopy and canopies in general? That's 125. 123 is not.
Can you scroll this section up? I think I'm...
Certainly.
Okay, so if you scroll back up to the top again. Yes, so this is it's walkway +1. Sorry, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So can you explain, just to ask the question one more time, why it was that under H92, which referred to part 123 or para 123 of the NBS spec, which is the rain screen cladding higher up in the tower to the spandrel panels, it still referred to zinc composite when ACM had by now been selected?
Well, for the reasons I think I mentioned slightly earlier, but I know Bruce was keen to try and keep the zinc, and obviously the ongoing planning issues. Zinc, CM, ACM, interchangeable in terms of performance. But yes, it
was out of date, wasn't it?
Well, not if you consider it as part, say, taken from the employer's requirement set of drawings, which would have been done.
By the time you sent this document to Mr. Ashton, Mr. Crawford, this drawing, in that respect, was out of date.
But there's no onus to update that, because from that point on, Harley were doing the detailed drawings.
Okay, Harley, right. Let's look at something else. If you could please be shown the far left-hand side of the drawing, just above the title mezzanine level +9. You have to scroll down. Go down a little bit further. Yes, stop there. Perfect. Now, you will see that what is on the screen is lower down, mezzanine level +9 and then 3 zeros. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then 3 arrows or circles above that, you can see H92776 thermal insulation. You see that?
Yes.
Now we can see that this drawing does not record the fact that Celotek's FR5000, let alone RS5000, had been specified. Why was that?
With all due respect, this drawing was from the employer's requirements. But sorry, you're saying, I didn't quite catch that. You're saying the H92776 reference,
Yes, thermal insulation.
but does that not reference back to the FR5000?
It does. If you go, of course, back to the NBS spec, it would say FR5000. My question is, why doesn't thermal insulation either refer to FR5000 or RS5000, which by this time had now been specified?
But we didn't know the RS5000 had been specified at that point.
I thought that at this point you had the data sheet
No, the data sheet
for
was,
RS5000, and
'Cause
you told us this morning
sorry.
that you'd had a conversation with Mr. Bailey, Ray Bailey of Harley, who told you that RS5000 had now been specified.
Yes, but you were talking about the emails from 17th, 18th
18th.
September?
Yeah.
Yes, but that's when we received the data sheet.
Do you know why it was that no product had been specified at all in relation to that arrow with thermal insulation?
But it has been because it's referenced back to 776 H92.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't really get your point because.
Well, never mind. I'm just seeking to understand. Really, what I'm seeking to get from you, Mr. Crawford, is,
Sorry, I'm not trying
is how complete these documents were when you sent them to Mr. Ashton, so that he could understand the detail. Do you see the details that he was after in the external wall construction?
Can I just clarify though? These drawings, we worked the drawings up to employer's requirements, the stage E to the tender set. After that point, Harley take over. So Harley do the drawings after that. So what I've sent him is where we had taken the drawings up to, plus Harley's drawings. That's the state of the design. That's where the design is at. And that includes their proposition for the installation, which is the same day. I mean, even if you had gone back and retrospectively updated everything, you wouldn't have been able to do it the same day. But we weren't under any obligation to update it because at that point, this was Harley's proposals moving forward. Do you see where I'm coming from?
So let's just have a look at another part of this. If you go to the right-hand side of the drawing, you can see that there is a label under P10. Oh, no, go back down again, please, Mr. Operator, and go to P10235. Do you see it says thermal insulation to prevent cold bridging?
Yes.
And then there's an arrow to a piece of insulation there. In fact, did you know this? But in fact, that thermal insulation was rock wool, but the drawing doesn't specify that rock wool had been chosen, does it?
But P10 is in sundry items. And
Indeed.
Sundry items covers precisely that, sundry items.
Indeed.
This detail is of a roller shutter along the ground floor.
Yes.
So it's specific, very specific, limited bit of detail. Is not the overall insulation. It's a specific bit of insulation behind a very specific detail.
Well, let's see if we can get this way. Anybody looking at these drawings, Mr. Ashton receiving them from you, would not know when he looked at them what the rain screen was comprised of, or what the insulation behind the rain screen was, or indeed what the insulation to prevent thermal bridging or cold bridging was.
No, I disagree.
You disagree. Why do you disagree?
Well, first of all, we sent him the data sheet with the installation on it. So that was Harley's proposal, had their installation on it, and then clarified the ACM.
Did you send Mr. Ashton the NBS spec?
I don't recall.
Why not? Oh, sorry, no, I do recall. Would it not have been sensible to send him not only the drawings, but the NBS spec, so that he could see exactly what the details he was after were?
Well, to be clear, my understanding was that he did understand what was being built. So what I sent him was the Harley details. Then Harley's proposal in relation to the installation, and then clarified the cladding type.
Well, why didn't you say to Mr. Ashton, here are the drawings, and here's the NBS spec, so that you can make sense of the materials in the external wall construction? You didn't do that. So my question is, why not?
Well, then, NBS spec contained a number of alternatives. What I was trying to do is communicate what I believed we were building.
Why didn't you say to Mr. Ashton, I should just tell you that the bits where it says zinc isn't right anymore, it's aluminium composite?
But I think I did. There was a follow. Zinc CM and ACM, in performance terms, as I understood it, are the same. And then, so he worked on the assumption, I think, of the zinc CM, performance of which would have been the same as the ACM. And then when, I think at the end of the conversation, I did confirm with him that it was, my understanding was that we were running with ACM.
When was that conversation, please?
At the same time.
Same time as?
The 17th, 18th conversation.
What that you referred to on Thursday, where you told us that he had said that the Celotex was compliant. Same conversation as that? Is that what you're saying?
I think it was, yes, I think it was.
Really?
I mean, maybe I've got conversations mixed up.
Do you agree with this proposition that Exova could not have produced any reliable analysis of the compliance of the proposed overcladding scheme with requirement B4 of the building regulations without knowing what cladding or rain screen and insulation materials were going to be used in the structure?
But they did know.
Yeah, sorry, can I have my answer to my question?
Sorry.
Do you agree that Exova couldn't have produced any reliable analysis of the compliance of the proposed overcladding scheme with B4 unless they did know what was being used as the...
Yes, and if they
You
didn't
do.
know, they couldn't.
Thank you. You say they did know because you told Mr. Ashton, is it right, on the telephone, is that right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was within the conversation, yes.
Right. On the 17th or 18th of September? Yes? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think, without going back and checking all there's so many emails and there's so much data, I can't recall precisely what was explained when. But my understanding is that I clarified it with the insulation.
Now, it's right, isn't it, that Exova never did produce a further issue of its outline fire safety strategy, did it?
Not that I'm aware of. I remember having the conversation with Terry about the suitability of the insulation and the suitability of the cavity barrier strategy. I remember having these distinct telephone conversations. And then I remember asking him to put into an email confirmation that he believed that they were appropriate. He did send a response, which I think on reflection is more of a tacit approval. But my understanding is that his belief was that it was compliant.
Well, we're going to look at the rest of the email chain shortly. But just so I understand your answer, you're saying, are you, that you had a telephone conversation with Mr. Ashton on the 17th or 18th of September in which he told you that Celotex RS 5000 and Rainobond PE 55 aluminium composite material rain screen ACM
yeah.
were compliant? Is that your evidence? I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm trying to summarize what I think you've been telling me. And if I'm wrong, please say.
My understanding is that in discussing the fire strategy, the cavity barrier strategy in relation to the wall build-up, he understood what the wall build-up was. He'd sent him the installation detail and the installation data sheet, and he understood what the cavity barrier strategy was, and he understood what the cladding panel build-up was, and I asked him to confirm that in writing.
And you say that he did confirm it in writing, but only tacitly.
He confirmed in writing that he thought it was an appropriate, but in reflection, it's more of a tacit approval than an explicit one.
Right.
When I reread it.
All right. Well, we'll come to see what we do see in writing shortly. Just to be clear, it's right, certainly from the documents that the inquiry has seen, that Exover's proposition in its issue 3 of its outline fire safety strategy of 7th November 2013, that the proposed changes would have no adverse effect on the building in relation to external fire spread, was never confirmed by any analysis by Exover.
That's correct.
And it was never confirmed by any other specialist fire consultant in any report during the period you were project architect on.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. And you never sought to chase one up. And is that because, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that because of what you say are the assurances that Mr. Ashton gave you over the telephone on the 17th or 18th of
Yeah,
September?
I remember having conversations with Mr. Ashton on a number of occasions across the project on a number of issues, separate issues. But I remember on the on this particular issue in relation to the cavity barriers, and when the data sheet for the installation was sent, I remember I remember him alluding to the fact that you'd have to complete the report or something of that nature, and I never thought any more of it. Firstly, because I basically had the conversation with Bruce about what I understood we had and whether it was compliant, and then had the conversation with Exova, and to me, Exova just confirmed that yes, what we understood compliant was compliant, and that was it. And
Right. Now, let's just go back to the email chain. Going back to it, at SEA 100011719, you can see the second email down on the first page. This is in response to you, where you sent him the fairly limited drawings. Terry Ashton, comes back to you, and we're now 18th of September, 1532. You see that?
Yes.
Neil, if the insulation in the cavities behind the rain screen cladding is combustible, note the if, you'll need to provide cavity barriers as shown on your drawing, numbered 1279-06-120, in order to prevent fire from spreading from one flat to one above, even if there isn't a continuous cavity from the top to the bottom of the building. Kind regards, Terry. You see that?
yes,
Now, clearly by this point in the day, 18th September, 3:30, you hadn't yet had this telephone conversation with Mr. Ashton where he confirmed that Celotex was compliant and that ACM was compliant, as you now say, had you? I mean, the reason I say that, to be clear, is he's saying if the insulation in the cavities behind the rain screen is combustible. Now, if you'd had the discussion with him about Celotex being non-combustible, as you tell us, then that conversation must have happened after 1532 on the 18th of September, mustn't it?
not necessarily. I mean, he's saying if the insulation in the cavities in the rain screen is combustible, he may have understood the information I'd given that that was the case.
Well, if he had understood that the information you had given him showed that the rain screen was combustible and the insulation in the cavities was combustible,
Okay, sorry.
well, we can ask him. If he had thought it was combustible, then that that would not reflect the conversation that you're telling us you had with him.
Can you just pull up the email when the data sheet was forwarded? Because I'm losing track. There's so many emails, I'm losing track.
Indeed.
What was sent when?
Yes, we can do that.
6 years ago?
Yes, we can do that. If you go to the email of, it's SEA 0001730, and it's at page 2. Let's see that. I think the one you're after is at 1603, which is where Daniel Anketell Jones says to you, the insulation is class 0.
Yes, but
That's after. To be fair to you, that is after the conversation that you've had, or rather after the email I've just shown you at just before 3:30 on the same day.
What I'm trying to establish is, do you have the email with the attachment on it that was sent?
Yes, and we looked at that earlier. If you stay on this page, it's SEA 0001173, page 2. We can see, and we'll go back to this again. Go back to this. I know. Go back to this at page 2, second email down. That's where Daniel Anketell Jones tells you the insulation is class 0, and then you email Terry Ashton saying, "Is this interpretation correct?"
Yeah, what I'm trying to establish is the email that had the data sheet on it, because that's the data sheet was forwarded to Terry, so that would give you the time.
Yes, and according to your statement at 192, you say you sent that comment to Exova together with the data sheet.
Okay, so which...
That's what you said in your statement.
So confused
You
now.
can't see it from... I agree with you, you can't see it from the email, because the email doesn't refer to an attachment. But you say in your statement that it does.
Yeah, the problem with the way these emails are presented, when you see them in, when you see the actual email in Outlook, you can see the attachment, whereas this, I can't, that's why I can't determine which one the attachment was on.
Yeah. Now, I'm just trying to establish the time on the day at
Yes.
which you had the conversation you're referring to. I think we've established that it wasn't before the email when you go back to him, sending him the detailed drawings. So it must have been after that. Do you think it was after the exchange of emails where you get the data sheet from Daniel Anketell Jones and then send it on to Terry Ashton?
I think it would have been after, yes. I mean,
Right.
that's logical.
So going to the email chain then, and still on this page, it's not inconvenient to stick with this reference. If we can have scrolled down a little bit, please, this email chain at page 2, just to see the top of it. I'm afraid it goes over 2 screens. Right. And if you could scroll up to the top of page 2, I think that's the email we want. Right, there it is. Just lost it. Daniel Anketell Jones says to you the insulation is class 0, and then you say to Terry Ashton, and that's at 1603, and you say to Terry Ashton, if you could scroll down, please, because we've only got half the email. This is at 1532, and then you go back to him. This isn't right. At 1550. Okay, what's gone wrong here, I'm afraid, is that I don't think my instructions to the operator are getting through. Could I please be shown the top half of page 2 of this document and the bottom of page 1? So we can see the email to you from Daniel Anketell Jones at 1603, and then you sending that to Terry Ashton at bottom of page 1, please. Just there, 1607. You look at page 1. We've managed to get both parts of the email screen up on the screen, email string on the screen. So you send this on to Terry Ashton at 16:07, yes? And then he responds to you at 16:21.
1603 and 1621 are the times I'm seeing.
Right, so let's take it even more slowly. Right, on the right-hand side, you've got Daniel Ankleton-Jones telling you installation is class 0, 1603.
Yeah.
The email, which is, I'm afraid, split over 2 pages, which you send to Terry Ashton, is at 16:07. If you look on the screen in the bottom left-hand
Sorry,
corner.
I see what you're saying.
Yes. And then above that, Terry Ashton comes back to you at 16:21.
Okay.
Where he says a material which is class 0. Do you see that?
Yes.
So just to be clear about timing, which is what I'm trying to look at with you, you say, I think, that Daniel Ankleton-Jones sends you the data sheet at 16:03. You send that on to Terry Ashton at 16:07, 4 minutes later. Yes?
Yep.
And then Terry Ashton responds to you 30 minutes after that or so, when he says, Neil, a material which has a class 0 rating is not necessarily non-combustible. You see that?
Yes.
Right. Now, and then just to finish off the answer, perhaps we can look at the very top of page 1, just for the timing. You then go back to Terry at 17:12 and say, hi, Terry, thank you. Daniel, can you confirm your position in relation to Terry's comment below regarding combustibility and continuous cavity paths? I don't need the rest. Unless, well, you can certainly look at the rest, but I don't want to ask you about the rest. So that's the email chain on that day. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, when do you think, looking at that email chain, you had your conversation with Mr. Ashton about Celotex RS5000 being a material of limited combustibility or not combustible?
Well, it would have been after I sent him the data sheet.
After you sent him the data sheet, but before he responds?
I can tell you precisely, but it would have been after I sent the data sheet, because the data sheet would have been to inform him.
Right. Now, let's just look a little bit more closely, or even more closely, at your statement. Paragraph 192, if you go back to it, it's page 62. You say, in response to the comment Daniel Ankleton-Jones said, the insulation is class 0, and you set out the rest of the quotation, and then you say, again, I forwarded the comment to Exover together with the data sheet for Celotex RS5000, dated August 2014, that Daniel had attached to his email. You see that?
Yes.
That's what you say. But do you accept that looking at the emails, if we can just go back to them, please, that we had a minute ago on the screen, SEA 11730, and we'll have page 2, which is what you're referring to. Which is the one from Ankleton-Jones to you at 1603. Do you accept that looking at that, neither Mr. Ankleton-Jones's email to you nor yours to Mr. Ashton referred to an attachment?
This comes back to what I said earlier. I was trying to establish which email had the attachment on it, and I can't see it from the way these are presented here. If you know, when you're in Outlook and you see your email and it's got attachment, so you know, because the way this is presented, I can't tell.
Right. Well, perhaps we can just, to be fair to you, show you a different email, or rather the same email in a different guise. If you look at SEA 000111724, which is the one you refer to in your statement.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you refer to in your statement, and it's on the screen there. But again, we don't, I think, we don't see Mr. Ankleton-Jones sending you the data sheet, do we? What's the point? Don't think Mr. Anketel-Jones sends you the data sheet because his email doesn't have an attachment to it and he doesn't refer to an attachment, does he?
Well, that's how it appear there.
Right.
Well, just a minute, Mr. Millett. The top half of this page does seem to refer to an attachment, doesn't it?
It does. That's Mr. Crawford. I was just going to come to that, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
I just want to work out where the attachment originates.
But, sorry, can I just interject? The data sheet was sent from Harley to me, correct?
Well, you tell me.
Well, look, it says here attachments, rain screen cladding product data sheet.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it. Let's try a different way of going about it.
I think the point Mr. Millett's putting to you is that you can see from the top half of this page that where there is an attachment, it's referred to.
Yes.
And this is you sending that data sheet to Mr. Ashton.
Yes.
What we don't see, either in the bottom half of the page or I think in any other email we've looked at so far, an attachment to an email from Mr. Anketel-Jones to you. Is that your point, Mr. Millett?
Yes, that's right. So just looking at these two emails, Anketel-Jones to you and you to Mr. Ashton, Anketel-Jones doesn't attach the data sheet or refer to it, correct?
It seemed that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so we move to the next question. You then go to Mr. Ashton, and clearly you do attach the data sheet.
yes.
And my question is, was it you who decided to attach the data sheet to the email you were sending Mr. Ashton, or were you, as is possible, just forwarding it on?
I can't recall without seeing all the email.
All right, okay,
This is the
well-
problem. I'm used to looking at I'm
right.
used to looking at the historic emails, and then you can see and you can piece things together. I'm getting excerpts here. What I think happened is I was forwarding. What I understood was, from my recollection, is that it was forwarded to me from Harley, and then I forwarded it
I see.
to Exova. That's what I recollect. But because I don't have that,
Okay. Well, over the lunch break, we'll see if we can find that, because that may well be true. But what happens sometimes is that you don't always see the attachments on the versions of the emails that come up. But let's just focus on on the message in the email. It's certainly right, looking at these emails, that Mr. Anketel-Jones doesn't tell you to look at the attachment, look at the data sheet, and you don't mention the data sheet to Mr. Ashton, do you, when you send it on?
within the email you're showing me here, no.
No. And your witness statement doesn't refer to any discussion with Mr. Ashton in which you say that he told you that Celotex FR5000 was compliant with approved document B as a material of limited combustibility.
We're talking about RS 5000 at this point.
All right.
The data sheet was from RS 5000.
You are quite
That's
right.
the point. The RS 5000 was sent to me. It was sent to me from Harley, and then I forwarded it from Harley to Exova. That's the point. I wouldn't have forwarded it otherwise.
All right, let me put you're absolutely right, Mr. Crawford. I misasked the question. Let me ask it again.
Okay.
Your witness statement doesn't refer to any discussion with Mr. Ashton in which he told you that Celotex RS5000 was compliant with approved document B.
Correct. It may not refer to any discussion, but there were discussions going on.
And nor does it refer to any discussion in which he told you that RS5000 was a material of limited combustibility, did he? Does it? The statement doesn't do that.
I never said that you did.
And there's no email record of where you actually asked him the question, Terry, is RS5000 compliant with the building regulations?
Categorically, no. But I sent him that as a package of details of the build-up.
And you ask him, all you asked him when you send him the data sheet is this interpretation correct? You don't ask him, is RS 5000 compliant with the building regulations, do you?
No, but he's asked for details of the build-up. I've sent him details of the build-up and I've clarified what the proposed installation type is. There's a series of conversations that took place around that, and for sure it was more than one telephone conversation. What I don't have is a record of all those conversations. I just have a sense of what was sent and what I agreed.
Yeah. Given the absence of any reference in your witness statement to a telephone conversation with Mr. Ashton on the subject of whether Celotex RS 5000 complied, are you quite sure in your recollection, as you told us on Thursday and again this morning, that you actually did have a conversation over the telephone with him?
There's definitely conversations going on in parallel with the emails, for sure.
Can you explain why it is that your witness statement, which is lengthy and detailed, made absolutely no reference to such a telephone conversation?
Well, there's a lot of telephone conversations that took place, so I wouldn't have recorded them all. And also, you can't say precisely what you said in telephone conversations. You only know what you discussed in general terms, let's say.
Given that you knew by this stage that Exova had promised a further analysis as to whether the proposed cladding would comply with approved document B so far as external fire spread was concerned, and given what you now tell us, namely that you had a conversation over the telephone that Celotex RS 5000 complied, was that not something that you would have put in your witness statement? Mr. Crawford, I'm going to ask the question and you can answer it. Is that not something that you would have put in your witness statement had it actually happened?
To be clear, the conversation that I had was in relation to the cavity barrier proposal in relation to the build-up. That was the conversation I was having.
Indeed. But given, it is a but, given the importance of, as Exova had said, getting a future analysis of whether or not the proposed overcladding complied with ADB, and given what Mr. Ashton, you say, was telling you over the telephone in the middle of this email string on the afternoon of the 17th of September, I'm suggesting to you, I'm putting it to you, that you would have recorded that in writing at the time, and you would have put it in your witness statement. And
No.
my question to you is, you didn't, why not?
No, I'm trying to explain to you how what I understood happened. First of all, that's what I'm trying to say is that the conversation was in relation to the cavity barrier strategy. Harley sent me additional information in relation to the RS 5000, and Exova were looking for clarification of what the details and the build-up was, and that's what was going on in those conversations, and that email conversation backwards and forwards. That was what was being that was what was being established. I mean, it was primarily around the cavity barrier strategy, but it sucked in other stuff. The conversation wasn't about them doing this follow-up report. That wasn't what the conversation was about. The conversation was about the cavity barrier strategy, but inevitably brought the other elements into the conversation.
Right. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
If
I'm
it is-
afraid I'm midstream, but
Well, I
There it
don't
is.
think we can do much about that.
No.
Right. We're going to have a break now, Mr. Crawford. Again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or things related to...
Can I just say, it's
Yep.
I don't want you to feel I'm being obstructive. I'm just trying to recollect relative to what I know I had in emails and in notional conversations that I know I had around about the same time. And it's very difficult because there's definitive email trails, but there's a lot of telephone conversations, and I'm trying to link them in logically to what I was talking about at the time. And that's why I'm emphasising this was a conversation about cavity barriers, but it expanded from that, and you could see that because it brought the installation into that conversation. But it wasn't a categoric conversation about dealing with the follow-up report. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't just want you to feel that I'm somehow dodging or not. You know, I'm trying my best and to relay what I understood happened.
No, and we understand that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
thank you for clarifying. All right, would you like to go with the usher then?
Yes.
Please, we'll resume at 2:05, please. 2:05, please.